And we are live. Welcome, Mystery and Thriller Mavens. I'm your on air host and author, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome tonight Clémence Michallon, who's here to give us the inside scoop on her brand new book out now, Our Last Resort. Clémence, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So, Our Last Resort is the story of Frida and Gabriel, two people who travel to a beautiful, secluded resort in the desert in Utah. And they're trying to mend their sibling relationship. Everything is going well enough, not perfectly well, but okay, until a few days into their stay, a female guest turns up dead, evidently murdered. And the murder investigation is going to quickly focus on Gabriel because it's not the first time a woman has died in his orbit. Now, Gabriel and Frida share a pretty specific, intense bond because they both grew up in a secluded cult in upstate New York. So the book is told in dual timelines. One spans days and follows the murder investigation in the hotel and its consequences on our characters. And one spans years and years and follows their past in the cult and the fallout from that.
Well, I cannot wait to get into every single detail. And I know I have a lot of questions and our audience has a lot of questions. So first, I just want to welcome everyone because we are broadcasting live to 7 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So mystery and thriller fans, no matter where you're watching from, you're in the right place. This is the right time. It is Mystery Monday because Mondays can be murder. We're going to make it a little less painful and get your week off to a killer start. So if you've been with me before, you know the drill. And if you're new, welcome, friends. Here's the drill. Every Monday, I give you my handpicked featured authors, and you get to ask them anything. So ask Clemence about these characters, about Frida, about Gabrielle, about the cult, about the murder, about her writing process. Any questions you have, get them going in the questions, and I'll get them right over to Clemence. Sharon is joining us live from YouTube. She says, "Hi, girls." Hi, Sharon.
Hi,
Bonjour.
Sharon. Bonjour.
Oh, welcome, Robin from
Oh,
Facebook.
Coeur
Hello, all from sunny
d'Alene.
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Welcome, Robin. Good to see you. Chris is joining us from hot and smoky Toronto. Good to see you, Chris. Welcome. Renee is joining us. Oh, sorry, Anissa. Oh my goodness, everybody's popping up. Renee is joining us from stormy Southeast Florida. That feels appropriate for a thriller, Renee. She says, "Hi, Sarah and Clemence." And Anissa is joining us from South Carolina. Hi, Anissa. Welcome, everybody. All right, let's jump into these questions. So, Clemence, first of all, let's talk about your writing process. So, as a journalist turned thriller author, tell us about your writing practice. Are you writing every day? Are you hitting goals? Tell us all the things.
This is such a good question. So, as a journalist, I there's one thing that I've incorporated into my writing practice in fiction, which is the magic of the word count. I'm a word count girl. That's how I get it done. Because when you work in a newsroom, you always know when you start writing an article whether you're getting 500 words, 1,000 words, 2,000 words. So I've always done daily word counts, and they can be flexible. It can be anything between 500 to 1,000 words. So this way, if I do 700, I didn't fail to do 1,000. I went over 500. It's so easy for the process to feel demoralizing. So I think it behooves us as writers to just do what we can to keep things positive. But yeah, so daily word counts, and I usually take a break on the weekends, I have to
Okay.
say, because I just kind of need a break to reset. And on the weekends, I tend to kind of think about the story more as a whole. I check in with myself about pacing and where we're headed. Although currently, I am doing a smaller word count 7 days a week because I'm on book tour for Our Last Resort. So it's just easier for me to do a little bit every day.
Ooh, okay, cool. Well, I want to get back to that because I have some more questions, but I'm going to get to some of these questions as well. So, we have a lot of people wondering about the cult. So, first, Sharon from YouTube is asking us, "What kind of research on cults did you do?" And then Alan from Facebook simultaneously asking, "What kind of research did you do to understand your characters growing up in a cult?" So, let's take that piece by piece. First, with Sharon about the cults in general.
Yes. So I have been fascinated with cults since I was a kid. I found out that cults were a thing when I caught a segment on French television back when I was in elementary school, I think, and it was It was a 60 minutes type segment, and it went into various cults and high control groups. And I think I had to cults the same reaction that I had to serial killers, which was that, wow, it had never occurred to me that this could exist, but also it makes total sense that it would sort of emerge from our society. So, in terms of research, I'd actually been following various cults for a lot of years. So, I've watched various documentaries. And then when the time came to write the book, I refreshed my memory, you know. So, what I wanted was for the cult in the book to feel both rooted in reality, but also made up. I didn't want it to be too similar to one specific real life cult. So, I borrowed some characteristics. If you read the book, you'll see there's a bit of David Koresh. There is a bit of Jonestown because the cult in Our Last Resort is a commune. So followers, you know, live in a secluded place together, kind of cut from the world. But there's also a bit of Nexium, which was this cult that was based in New York State that was busted a few years ago. And this one I had a mild personal connection to because so the leader of that cult is called Keith Raniere. He's currently in prison where he will live out the rest of his days. And my husband worked for the prosecutor's office that handled the federal prosecution of Keith Raniere. So my husband was a public information officer. It's essentially a publicist. So he was liaising with journalists who were following the trial and giving them access to public information and all that stuff. I was also a journalist following Nexium at the time, so sometimes I had to like call his office. But that really, you know, just having this small real life tie to it really made me fascinated with it. So I read the books. I watched The Vow, which was this 2-season documentary about Nexium on HBO Max. That played a big part.
I wasn't sure how you were going to end that sentence when you said my husband worked
I know.
for. I was waiting for her
Yes.
for you to say David
I know.
Koresh.
I always want to be like, this is not going where you think it's going.
Oh my gosh. And now let's talk about Alan's part of the question. What about kids who grow up in the culture of a cult?
Yeah, so there are sort of two parts to this answer, right? Like one is the logistics part and one is the emotional part. The logistics was the part that I really had to research the most, right? What is it like when you've grown up off the grid and you're trying to integrate society? Literally, what is that like? And I ended up on websites by organizations who help people leave cults and high control groups, or for people who were raised off the grid for one reason or another. And I discovered, you know, what you have to be thinking about is, how do I get a social security card? How do I prove that I exist and I am me when I do not have a birth certificate? You know, what do you do when you literally do not exist in the eyes of a government? Which was interesting because for me, I'm an immigrant. I came to the US 11 years ago, and you know, I had to apply for my social security number. I kind of like those pieces of existence that can fall together pretty naturally. I sort of had to put them together from scratch as an adult, so I remembered that process. Um, so that's the part I researched. And then there was the emotional part. And I think this
Mhm.
one was really an exercise in imagination and empathy and just asking myself, you know, how do I tell the story of these two people? Sometimes when something feels daunting in writing, I remind myself that I don't have to tell the story of every person who leaves a cult. I have to tell the story of these two people. And so it was a really interesting intellectual exercise to ask myself, what if you had never been on a train? Right? And then you were on a train. What would a tunnel look like to you? How would you describe that? How would the sway of the train feel to you if you've never even been in a car before, you know? That was really interesting. I loved writing those parts.
That is fascinating. And weirdly, I was at an event 6 months ago in December, a writer's event, and I fell into conversation with another writer. And by the end of the night, she actually ended up telling me that she had grown up in a cult. And it was a very, fascinating conversation that we had. And now we go for dog walks. And
Oh,
it's just
wow.
a really interesting, you know, not something you hear at every writer's event.
Absolutely. Yes, that is definitely unexpected.
Yeah. Anissa, my favorite librarian, would like to know, Clemence, what did you learn while writing your debut that helped you write this book? Also, see you in Winston-Salem in September.
See you in September, Anissa. Thank you for your question and for being here. Let's see. A debut teaches you a lot of things. Well, first of all, my debut, The Quiet Tenant, taught me that I could do it. That I can write a book in English, which is not my first language, and that I can, reach readers and express myself and take what's in my head and put it on the page. All of which, I think it's normal when you've done it once, you kind of like take it for granted. But I try to remind myself that there was a point in my life when the goal was to write, right? Like now I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I wrote so bad today. And it's like, well, there was a time in your life when you would celebrate just sitting down and getting the words down, So the
Mm,
goalpost is certainly moving. But I think also a debut is, and the first time you go through professional edits with an editor, you really do learn to think about the reader,
mm,
I think a debut, you're kind of like alone with yourself when you're writing it, and it's all about what feels right to me. But I think with this one, I thought about the reader a lot more
mm,
and kind of just trying to keep track of what I had disclosed to the reader, what I had not yet disclosed, keeping track of pacing and mystery and all that stuff.
mm. In what way? That's a great question, Anissa, and thank you for that. Thank you for that. Only a librarian would think to ask. I love it, and thank you for that juicy answer. Um, in what way did you find that thinking about the reader more changed your writing?
Well, I think that is an interesting way to look at it. I think that it just made me more conscious of, we have to skip the boring parts. I mean, and I was very conscious of it in The Quiet Tenant as well. It's an instinct I have as a journalist anyway. Journalism is a form that calls for brevity and clarity, and but it was just our last resort being told in dual timelines. There was a lot of layers to it, and it was just very helpful to think about, what will the reading experience be like? What do I want to read about now as the reader? So, for example, I write in sequence all the time. So I wrote, I would go into one timeline and then I would go into the other timeline, and I alternated in my writing the same way that you alternate in your reading. And that's very important to me, to keep track of the reader's experience in that way, and to ask myself, what would be interesting to learn now? What do we need to know? That
Mm,
kind of stuff.
mm. Donna, welcome to the conversation. She wants to know, do you have a favorite character that you have written? Yeah, do you we could even say from this book and from your first book.
Yeah, so it is interesting. Like there's something I enjoy or like probably in all of my characters, strangely enough. It's because even the most heinous ones, I give them at least one characteristic that I can personally relate to. Um, and then there are just characters who are a delight and who surprise you, and who just reveal things to you as you're writing, and you just
Mm,
end up kind of falling in love with them. So without revealing which categories the characters I'm about to name fit into, um, Gabriel in Our Last Resort was a bit of a cipher to me for a good amount of
mm,
time. He took his
mm,
time in revealing himself to me. But in the end, I really enjoyed, you have friends sometimes like that who are really interesting people, but it takes like a few, hangouts to really get a sense of them, and he was kind of like that. And um, what I did with Gabriel was that I use a little trick that I have. When I find a character a little bit difficult to understand, I give them a trait that I share or that I can relate to. And so with Gabriel, I made him a big Roman Empire nerd. He loves the Roman Empire. And he knows more than I do. He's much more of a specialist than I am, and he's a professional too. But I studied Latin and Roman civilization for 8 years between middle school and college. And so I spent a lot of time learning about the Roman emperors and all their madness and strange behavior. And that was enough to create a little door into his mind that I could go into. And even if his character gets tricky, and there are definitely parts that I can't relate to, it just gave me a door, an entryway. And then in The Quiet Tenant, um, there's a serial killer in The Quiet Tenant for those who haven't read it, and he has a daughter who is a teenager, and her name is Cecilia, and she was just lovely to write because I thought she was super smart and insightful, but also a kid. So there's only so much she can sort of decipher and make sense of, but also there's only so much she can do. So she had like
Hmm.
this really moving vulnerability about her. I really enjoyed writing Cecilia.
Yay. Thanks for joining, Donna. Your great question. John is joining us from Northeast Ohio. Hey, John. Good to have you here.
Okay, I was just in Ohio. I just flew in from Columbus today.
Yay. There's already an Ohio connection. We're halfway through our interview, so I want to pause here and just remind you guys that, I always say that books make the best gift. And what makes the extra best gift? Signed books, which we have courtesy of our partner in crime, Murder by the Book, woman-owned, independent, mystery dedicated, legendary Murder by the Book, which just received the Thriller Fan of the Year award at the ITW Thriller Fest awards. And Clemence was just out there in Texas, and we have stockpiles of signed books. So I'm going to post the link. And whether you're watching with us on Facebook or YouTube, you can get your mitts on Our Last Resort right here, signed copies of Our Last Resort. So whether you're watching with us on Facebook or YouTube, here is that link, and you can get your mitts on signed books as well. And John McDougall from the store writes that Clemence is, quote, delightful.
Oh, I appreciate that. It was such a great event. Thank you, John. Um, it was
Yay.
so good to return to Murder by the Book. It's such an impressive store. They have fostered such an incredible community. They do the best events. They're fantastic. We're really blessed to have them.
Yay, yay. And it was so fun seeing McKenna, our very own murder book boss, get an award at Thriller Fest this year. So here again is that link, and we're going to jump back into the questions now. Julie, welcome to the conversation. She wants to know, did you base the cult on a real one? Also, she adored this book.
Thank you so much, Julie. I really appreciate that. That makes me very happy. Um, so I didn't base the cult on a specific real one, but I kind of pulled from various cults that I had knowledge of. And, even sometimes not even cults, but I guess I think there's this thing where as a journalist, I try to separate my journalism work from my fiction, but my obsessions are my obsessions. And I find that if you look at the journalism I did a year or two ago, you will sort of find traces of, you will sort of find echoes of the themes I was exploring for the novel that I was working on, which was kind of a fun little way actually of teasing my work. I guess if people are aware of it, whatever I'm writing about at any given time as a journalist will probably surface in a book later. Not even by design, it just happens. So, in terms of real life experience, I did, I spoke to a couple of people who had a loved one in a high control group. And I think it's really, and again, we mentioned Nexium earlier, we mentioned Jonestown, we mentioned David Koresh. I think it's really important for me as a writer to both separate myself from reality, because that's how you find your freedom as an
Mm,
author of fiction to just make up your story. But also to witness that reality, because I think it's important to remember that this stuff happens in the real world to real people, and it's
mm,
not real suffering.
mm. Well, clearly it's working, Clemence, because when I look at the list of of all the places that this book is most anticipated and all of the incredible press that it got, I'm gonna post it here so we can all. I'm gonna pop it up on the screen so we can all take a look. It's absolutely incredible. So, a most anticipated book of the summer by the New York Times, USA Today, Oprah Daily, the Boston Globe, Marie Claire, CrimeReads, Apple Books, Goodreads, Brit and Co., She Reads, BuzzFeed, BookBub, Tag 24. I might have missed 10 or 20 more. But this book is just everywhere. And so I just wanted to make sure to share that, because this is, I mean, so impressive, really, really cool.
Thank
And
you so much. I appreciate that. That's a testament to the great work of, the people I work with, right? Like the publicity and marketing departments and my publishing house and my freelance publicist, just everyone really works so hard.
yay! And Clemence's freelance publicist is my friend Kathleen, who's been
Yes.
sending me fabulous authors for 5.5 years. I can't even believe it. Everybody from Dean Koontz to Clémence Michallon. We do it all here. But it's not just the most anticipated. Let's take a look at some of the reviews from other authors. Mary Kabika, who's been on Mystery of the Throne Mavens for her last 3 books, raves thought-provoking and shocking. She deems it a perfect summer read. And she's not the only one raving as well. We have the incredible #1 New York Times bestselling author, Lisa Jewell, weighing in as well, saying Clémence Michallon is one of the most daring, exciting new voices in psychological suspense. She writes page turners with stunning and surprising depth. Again, from #1 New York Times bestselling author, Lisa Jewell. Congratulations on those 2 rave reviews. Clemence, as a 2-time thriller author and a journalist, what do you think is the secret to writing page turners with stunning and surprising depths?
I really appreciate that question. Oh my goodness, if I knew, I would bottle it and sell it. But I think there is something about, when we're thinking, so there's the page turning aspect and then there's the depth aspect, right? So page turning, I find for me, this is a quality that happens in revision and edits. My first drafts are not particularly page turning. They are messy. I don't outline. So my first drafts are just me filling my sandbox and figuring out what the story is and what the elements are going to be. And then the page turning aspect comes in revision when I can rely on my agent and my editor to help me shape this whole thing and make sure that we keep the reader turning the pages. I'm a big fan of cuts. Whether on the sort of I will cut entire characters, I will cut chapters, I will move chapters. But also on a sentence level, I have a rule with myself that I will try to fix a sentence twice, and if its third iteration still doesn't work, I just cut it. It's just not meant to be. So I think that, kind of being economical in the writing really helps. But then with depth, for me, depth comes from the work I do in the first draft,
Mm.
which is a balance between keeping things moving, keeping writing, not getting bogged down, but also taking enough time to get to know my characters, to learn things about them, to sort of uncover the depths of the story and all its nuances. So I think for authors, there are 3 big things, right? It's prose, plot, characters. And a lot of times we all do all 3, but a lot of times you'll have one that is your anchor. And for me, it really is the characters. So for all the months I'm working on the first draft, I carry the characters with me everywhere I go. I think about them all the time.
Mm.
I think about what they would do in whatever situation I'm in. I was on a plane earlier. There was turbulence. Like it's just interesting. What would so and so do? What would so and so think? And so I think that's where the depth comes from.
Mm. Thank you for that thoughtful answer. I will be noodling on that. I want to get back to some of the other praise from first Oprah Daily, which raves Michallon masterfully weaves past cult abuse into taut present day procedural, blending psychological complexity with enough terror to make you white knuckle your beach chair. I love that review because who doesn't want to white knuckle their beach chair? You want to be staring out at the waves and also be terrified. I want to get to some more of them, but first I want to answer this question for Renee. Can you tell us anything about your next thriller?
Thank you so much for asking. So I am about 75,000 words into my first draft for the next book. And I think it's going to be about 93,000 words in the end. So I am close to the end, but with the touring and launching, it's slowed me down a bit. It is going to be a psychological thriller, like a work of psychological suspense, like my previous 2. And I'm a little shy about revealing too much at this stage because I know so much is going to change in edit. So I'm going to tell you that it's like a thriller about, I'm just going to make something up, like boats on the Hudson. And then it's going to be about igloos in Antarctica. So, but I will say that I have one obsession that I have broadcast quite a bit on my Instagram account over the past year or two, and it plays a part in the novel I'm working on right now.
Excellent. Julie says, thank you so much for the answer. And she grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Renee also wants to know, was the title always Our Last Resort? Speaking of books that change.
No, that's a very good question. So my titles so far, I'm 100% always change. I have never sent a manuscript to my agent and or my editor and kept the title that was on it. So I don't get attached to titles because I know. So no, the title was not always Our Last Resort. It used to be something else, which was a decent title, but it wasn't very thrillery. And so that's the thing that a title has to do. It has to signal your category, and you have to be able to make sense of it. You know, you have to be able to see it on the shelf with that cover and all of that. So as I remember it, I had a little brainstorm and I wrote up a list and I started thinking hotel, resort, last resort, our last resort. I liked Our Last Resort because it's really a story about, well, it's a story about two people, Frida and Gabriel. And it's also a story that hinges a lot on the idea of community. You know, there's a cult, and even in the hotel, people are in a group of people in a compound in the desert, you know. So I suggested that, and it was kept, and it is the first and last pun I will ever make in public. I am not at all a punny person, but this one came from somewhere.
Do you remember what it was before Our Last Resort?
I do. I don't know if I should. It was We Were Family.
Okay. My book, in my mind, my book was Butterfly, Locust, Mistress, Wife. And I was like, this is the most brilliant title ever. This is fabulous. And they immediately changed it.
Did you come up with the new one?
No, my editor did. And as soon as she said it, I was like, oh my God, that's also perfect.
Isn't that great when someone just comes up with the perfect thing and you're like, yes, thank you. I will take it.
You're like, I feel seen. Oh my goodness. I want to also talk about this praise from Houstonian Ashley Winstead, the frequently making appearances at Murder by the Book, who says that the book, she says, Clemence, I'm going to take this down because it's covering our faces. Clémence Michallon is a genuine talent with a gift for unexpected angles, finding fresh ways of approaching even the darkest subjects that make them feel reinvigorated and daring. You come to Michallon for beautiful, thought-provoking prose and deep characterization. In Our Last Resort, she finds tenderness in a story about cults, dreaminess, and compassion in the lengths to which people will go to save themselves. Ashley's been on for her last two books, and it's so great to see her weighing in with that wonderful praise, as well as reviews from Andrea Bartz, who's been on for her last 4 or 5 books. I think Andy's been on every year since I started this, and so many more. I'm putting them all in the comments so that you all can peruse them at your own pace, because we are quickly running out of time. And I wanted to get to some of the questions that were submitted in advance. So we have from Mary Ann, who wants to know, she says she's writing her first book and she wants to know if you have any advice for her as an aspiring author.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, congratulations. Second, okay, 2 things. 1, finish the first draft. No, really finish the first draft. No matter what you do, finish the first draft. No matter how doomed you think you are, or maybe you don't, but like if it feels hard, if it feels easy, if it feels weird, no matter what, finish the first draft. It's the biggest lesson you will ever learn and the most important one. And it's one like when I wrote my debut thriller, I had one friend who just reminded me almost every week, just finish the first draft. And it's amazing to me how much easier it is to finish a completed first draft than like a third of a first draft. It makes all the difference in the world. And then the second thing is there's a lot of writing advice out there, and a lot of it is valid, but just find what works for you. Like try out everything that you think sounds interesting and do what works for you. Life is too short, you know, and whatever makes the work happen, keep doing that, you know?
Oh, I love that. Last question is going to go to Sharon, who wants to know, any chance you're coming to Massachusetts on this tour?
I was just there. I was I was in Brookline, right outside of Boston, in Brookline Booksmith. But I love Massachusetts, and I live in Westchester County, New York, so it's actually comparatively not very far, and I have a car now, so I would be very happy to come back to Massachusetts at some point.
Excellent. Sharon has been with me, I think, all 5.5 years, right, Sharon, since I started this series. And we finally met in person at an unlikely story last year when I hosted Lisa Unger's book launch. And it was so fun to meet a maven IRL in real life. So,
Oh,
Sharon, I love that you're, tracking down these virtual interviews. You
that is
guys,
lovely.
yay, we have amazing reviews from Booklist, Library Journal, Kirkus, Mary Kabika, Stacey Willingham, who we just saw at Thriller Fest, Andy Bartz, Kirkus, Ashley Winstead, Boston Globe, Oprah Daily. The list goes on and on and on. I'm putting them all here in the comments so that you can peruse them in your own time. But we are out of time. Time flies when you're having this much fun. So I want to wrap up by reminding you that we have signed copies from our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore. That is, of course, Murder by the Book. And whether you're watching with us on Facebook or YouTube, here again is that link to order your signed copy of Our Last Resort. I'm going to pop this up as well so you can grab it. And please note that I have color coordinated both my shirt and the color of the bar to that is showing our names so that we can all be the sunset color of Our Last Resort.
I am noting. I am noting and appreciating. Thank you for doing that.
Yay. You guys, thank you so much for spending your Mystery Monday with us. Thank you. Oh, Donna, you're welcome. Thank you. Renee, so great to have you. Oh my goodness, so great to have everybody. Thank you for all your lovely comments. I see them. And thank you to everyone who are my lovely lurkers as well. I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Robin, Julie, Donna, Anna. Oh my goodness, Jerry, Chris. I can't get to everyone, but I see you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for spending your Mystery Monday with us. I hope your week is off to a killer start. And I will be back next week with Jennifer Given and her much anticipated book, Salt Bones. Join me then and have a great week.